Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Data Science Office Hours. We're very happy to have you here, and I hope you find these sessions interesting. Please leave us your comments in the chat section below or on LinkedIn. So right now here, I'm with Kristen and with Kate, and the topic for today is the second part of a video we did like a month ago, I think, about data storytelling and how to convert your data into stories to sell or maybe just convince your boss that you're not crazy. So I'm going to start here, maybe asking some questions, and then we're going to do half an hour of talking for each other, and then you can ask your questions, okay? So let me start by asking. So Kate, for you, what's the hardest part of data storytelling?
Well, not the hardest part, but I think there's usually a process that I follow, which basically starts with the underlying data, because without data there's not much story, or if at least if the data is false or inaccurate, then you shouldn't even be telling that story. But I think making sure that the data itself is clean and accurate and reflective of the answer you're trying to get to is probably the most difficult part. I mean, I enjoy the other parts of it a lot, building the visualization, building the narrative, the visuals, and telling the actual story in a nice, concise way. But I think it's that preliminary part where, cleaning the data and making sure that you even have a good story to tell. That would probably be my challenge.
Right, and the same question for you, Kristen.
So I think the challenge with data storytelling is that it is an added amount of work, right? So, I'm sure we've all seen presentations where somebody will put like the coefficients of a model on a slide, and, not really bring that picture to life. And to bring that picture to life, you need to actually go in and do a lot of manual work. And for me, a lot of times that looks like, I'll pick a couple actual people and, say, okay, let's say I have a logistic regression model. Let's say it's just retention or whatever. And I'll find somebody who we think has a high probability of, leaving the company, and what do those attributes look like, and I'll give him a name. And so I have to actually dig into the data and see, what did he do, what inputs in the model, the engagement, show how he wasn't engaged, show how he hasn't called support, Joe hasn't logged in, Joe has only been with us for 3 months and he's late on his bill. Like, he's probably going to leave. And this is Terry. And Terry, logged in 20 times and she called support and, all these things or whatever. And like, I talk about these customers and sort of where they fit in terms of the model. But like, the challenge is, especially when we're trying to meet deadlines, is that creating a story, although it's, super important, and like that's how you're going to put your best foot forward, you need to be efficient in the way that you do it, because it does take more time.
I agree. So I think for me, I mean, in my own experience, the hardest part was changing the way you explain things to an audience, because the thing is, a lot of data scientists come from science. I mean, I come from physics and computer engineering and computer science and stuff. And this is not the way you are. I mean, if you're invited to present a paper or talk about a paper in a presentation, you're not going to tell a story like that. You're going to be explaining the formula. You're going to be explaining all of the different things, like the detail of the model, because you're expecting an audience prepared for that. So I think we're very used to have this background of going into details a lot, because we think, oh, if we don't go to details, they're not going to understand what I'm saying. So I think that one of the hardest part for me was understanding that this is a very different audience. It's a business focused audience, and they're not that aware of what we do. They have different kinds of backgrounds, and they're gonna be they're gonna be bored if what you're not, and if what you're talking about is not giving them any value. Because if you think about it, there's value. I mean, if I go to a physics conference and I see a formula that I've seen a lot of times before, and someone really explained it to me, and now I understand it, for me that's value. But I don't think that's value for a business guy. He wants to understand how does this process he spent 4 months building this model and stuff are going to help the business to be a better place, or get me more customers, or reducing the churn of the customers or the employees or whatever. So I think that's very important to understand that if you're coming from science or any related area, this is a very different kind of scenario there.
Absolutely. I totally agree, Fabio. It made me think of, being in grad school, getting my master's degree in statistics. Literally, we were taught that DEC is like the methodology is one, like how was the data sampled? How was, what methodology did we use? And the next slide is the output of the estimates and the confidence intervals and all those things. And, all of a sudden you get into industry and you have, no formal teaching on how to stay within a, reasonable color scheme so that things look aesthetically pleasing. Or I remembered making decks in grad school that, the templates were like, they were just the plain white, white PowerPoint, and then I was putting my black title, and it's absolutely a skill that you have to learn, that we're not taught in at least where I went to school. It was not taught.
Yeah, I agree with that, Kristen. And the one thing to keep in mind that I think once people are starting to learn PowerPoint and get better at being interactive, that's also going away. At least in my company, we're really moving away from using PowerPoint and trying to get more interactive. So there are new technologies out there that you can give your client a tablet and then show them how the product works, and things float around, and it's just so pretty and flashy. And now a deck is like old school. So things definitely move around, and they're definitely evolving.
Okay, so one question about that, Kate. A lot of people are trying to get into the data science space. And there's a lot of things to learn. You have to learn how to program, to understand the business, R, Python, machine learning, deep learning, and the list goes on and on forever. So I get what you see, but how a person can find a tool like Tableau that helps them and works for them to explain their data. I mean, I think Tableau is one of the best ones for doing that. But the thing is, you can also create very bad graphics with Tableau. I mean, how can you go from an histogram in Tableau to actually getting people interested in what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's actually something that came up in a meeting at work this morning. The fact that the technology they're using is not actually Tableau. It's similar, but it's more like PowerPoint. You can also do like other cool things in there. But the gist of it was that it's still a tool, just like PowerPoint, that you have to learn. And the standard template is, like Kristen said, the white background, the black text, and then you have to learn the skills, and you have to, evolve your imagination and creativity to make it look better. So you're still starting from scratch. And I think that the fact that I actually used to work a lot in PowerPoint. So in consulting, we even think in decks. That's what we call it. Like whatever we want to say, we have to think, how are we going to visualize this on a slide? So I think for me, it was a little bit easier going into data visualization because we had focused so much on, aligning the boxes just so they look exactly the same. And definitely wasn't bored with it, but it's a skill that you can learn and with practice.
What if someone doesn't have Tableau? I mean, I think I don't know how the thing works in the USA, but here in some countries in Latin America, we don't have that kind of tools. I mean, I know there's a free version, but it's public. And if you want to do
But
like
you can do
very
anything with the public version that you'd want to do with the desktop
no,
besides
but I
public.
mean, can you do a private? I mean, can you create a private presentation with the free Tableau?
There is a way. There's always a way, Fabio. So I
Okay.
read, I don't know, sorry, Tableau software, but I read that if you publish it private and then download it, it downloads itself as a desktop version that you can have saved on your desktop. Because you know how you can download other people's workbooks on Tableau Public? You can just publish yours as private so nobody actually sees it and then download it.
Okay, that's a good tip.
How safe
for
that
everyone
is if you
listening.
have really confidential data because you're still putting it onto their server, right? But that's just one workaround.
Yeah, but
I mean, and there's
people should
also,
be careful.
you can do, your visualizations in R too. You can make very pretty plots in R.
And create like a shiny die.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
but I mean, I'm in the part of shiny dashboards and stuff because I love to program. But to get to a cool dashboard in shiny is not that easy because
No.
the learning curve is way higher than the Tableau one.
Oh, Tableau!
Because you need to.
I taught my 14-year-old nephew how to build a dashboard in 5 minutes. So, and he wrote calculations and all that, and he
That's
picked
cool.
it up. So it is a lot easier, I think.
So, but let's think of this example, and this happens to me before. They tell you, hey, I wanted to have it in a PowerPoint presentation. I want it in this format, and I want an Excel format, whatever you want. This is common in some industry when they ask you to have I mean, they always use Excel and PowerPoint, and you have to adapt to it. How can you go and I mean, you can do very creative things in R and Tableau and stuff. If you need to use a presentation part, a presentation software, how can you create a good presentation to explain your point?
Yeah, so it's not easy, but you can make a presentation. You can make a beautiful dashboard in Excel. It's certainly not the way that I go anymore, but in years prior, if you have the hookup from SQL into Excel and you can create a refreshable dashboard, you can still use a lot of the same principles by, merging cells and making sure that, the number that's going to be at the top is the most relevant and that the colors are all streamlined and stuff. Like, you can do it. Tons of work, but you can do it.
I love that.
No, and I think, I mean, you can find templates for PowerPoint for a good presentation, and you have to think of a lot of things. I mean, if you go to, there are even courses on how can you create a good presentation, not for data science, but for like everything, and you can learn. And this is one of the things I say to people. I mean, sometimes we're very focused on what's on data science, and we learn, oh, with this new tool and things. But there's a lot of things you have to learn. And not all of them will be in a space for data scientists. Sometimes there will be in the space for business people or for marketing people. And you have to go there and meet more people, expand your connections, maybe on LinkedIn or GitHub or whatever, Twitter, and you will see they start sharing very cool information too. I mean, I've seen a lot of people share information from the side of marketing that has been very helpful for me. And there's a lot of templates like business presentations, the which colors to use. Oh, blue means this, and green means these different kind of things. So, I mean, I'm not that into the psychology of things. For me, that's somehow BS, but it's still, I think it's important to have a good template and like with words you can read. And one of the things I always say to people, don't put something in your presentation that you don't understand, because there's going to be questions about that, and you need to practice. I think we can move forward this conversation into what are the best practices to actually practice to be good at this. I think that's a good question to start this path I'm following here.
Yeah, I think for those that don't have the experience of actually, working on decks or building presentations or, using any medium you choose, it's really good to use my friend Google. I mean, if you just type in, let's say you need to put together a presentation on key performance indicators, and I still do this, I would just Google images, sample KPI dashboard, just to get your like juices flowing. And you can pull from 100 different ideas and create something of your own if you just can't start with something. As long as you're answering your question, I think it allows you to learn from other people's experiences really quickly. So we have this power of the internet. Sometimes it's slow. As I posted a few days ago, my internet crashes sometimes, but it's still there and it's very hopeful. So I'd say Google Images is a good place to just get ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you're creating something that's not a dashboard and it's going into PowerPoint or SlideShare or whatever, and you're in a company already, you want to use the branding that you want to use the branded template. And so restrict your color palette to that. Like, don't, if your brand colors are blue and yellow and you think they're ugly, well, your presentation is going to look way worse if you throw purple and green on there. Like, just stick to the shades of blue and yellow. And gradients are really great for differentiating. So multiple colors of blue instead of doing red, orange, yellow, green. Like, try and make things consistent. And back on that Excel point too, so like if you make an Excel graph, it's not you have your X, you have your Y, you hit insert graph. It comes out like standard, it comes out ugly, but you can remove the axis lines so that you don't have a million lines going up. You can remove the axis labels. You can remove things and make the blocks bigger and make them a consistent color and add labels in a way that makes it more intuitive and stands out and is prettier and aesthetically fits with your story. Even though originally you're going to fill in your data, you're going to hit insert graph and you're going to get back something ugly, but again, you put in the extra work and make it aesthetically pleasing.
No, I totally agree, and I think the first thing you have to do is ask if there exists a color palette for your company. And sometimes there are even presentations pre-built for you. I mean, I've worked in companies and they have a whole set of templates in Google Slides and PowerPoint that are free to use, and they're inside the company's hub. So if you don't know if they exist, the first thing is ask before spending 4 days creating something that already exists. So ask. And the second thing is, if you're creating plots from your side and you're using R and stuff, there are ways now, and I've shared 2 of them on my weekly digest for data science, for transforming an image to a palette. And there's a package called Paletter or Paletteer, something like that in R, and you can put there the logo of your company, and in most cases the logo will have the colors of your company, and it will give you a palette, plot, and all this different stuff in R. And there you go. You don't have to think about, hey, what's the color of this, and you have to ask a designer and stuff. That's all done for you. And there's even a new package, and I'm going to be reviewing tomorrow in the Weekly Data Science Digest, that is called GG Poop R, and that's a very cool package if you haven't heard of it. And it's a publication-ready ggplot for you in R. Sometimes you have to have a lot of different, if you're an R user, you know what I'm saying, because you need different like functions to create a good plot in ggplot. They came out very cool, but they're not so easy to build. And with this package called ggplot-r, you can have a very simple piece of code that will take the best practices for you for creating a presentation ready like graph. and you can pass your custom palette, and the one you created from the Paletteer uh, um, library. So I think if you're in the R world, you're in luck. If you're in the Python world, like I am, most of my time it's not that easy because we don't have Firebirds and all of that. But there's also packages that can help you good good graphic for your company. Okay, so okay, so I think we still have time. So one of the other things that people ask me is, okay, so I did a lot of things. Maybe you spend 3 months cleaning the data, and this is not something very, very weird. I mean, you'll spend a lot of time creating features and stuff. And then you create different models, and then you create different kind of presentations and stuff. And there's the time that they tell you, hey, you have to present this in 2 weeks, and you have to talk about what you did. So how to choose what to talk about? I mean, you can, and I mean, you have the easy way is to talk about everything, and you just put like 4 months in 100 slides, and that's it. But I think there are better ways. So what are your suggestions for choosing the best to explain to an audience what you did without them being confused or being wondering how did he do that?
So I'd say start with the question, like really frame the question up front and what the value is to the business and what you were trying to learn. And then say, the biggest thing that I found that was a driver of this thing that answers the question is this. And, so I did a presentation in February, and it was reviewing a model that was currently in place that hadn't been looked at for like 2 years, right? And I saw a lot of variability, people changing the groups that they were in. And so it was diving in and saying like, okay, well, they're changing a lot, but how are they changing? Okay, they're spending this much time in these states, and, they're like really going through and saying like, okay, on average, how many times are people changing states? Like that was a useful view, and showing the, number of times people are changing states by tenure, and then like actually going in and saying, okay, I'm going to pick a couple examples because we're seeing a lot of volatility. Like, here's a person, here's his type of business. He's been a relatively stable customer, but for some reason, he's still hopping around. And let me show you that person. And here's another person, and she's, got this other nonprofit business. And again, we're seeing that same behavior, and like really, so, stating what the question was. And in this case, it was trying to figure out if the model that was currently in place was still good. And the things that I was looking to highlight were that there was a lot of volatility in the way that people moved back and forth. And, we didn't think that that was necessarily jiving with like what real life, what it should be, and sort of highlighting those areas of, and it didn't, it was a huge analysis, but the only things that I showed were the things that really highlighted that volatility to make the argument for, hey, there's probably a better way that we can do this.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kristen. Starting with the question is usually how I start my approach as well. And even, I guess, before that is keeping the audience in mind. So I know you mentioned like who cares about this analysis and how is it going to impact them. One thing I read actually on a train today, it's like a book on TED Talks. It says that when you're presenting or preparing your speech or presentation or story in this case, try to think of the one individual that you're speaking to, although it might be like the entire sales team that you're presenting to about how this seasonality is affecting their sales and what they could do better to improve. basically pick that one individual because I hope you humanize it. And, let's say I'm presenting to Eric and he knows this much about data and data science. And then you'll be able to, I guess, massage your message in a better way. So it's not too technical. Basically, you take the average person of the group in terms of, technical skill set and then target that individual. So I think that could be helpful in terms of the audience.
Yeah, I think that's a good part. You guys said was very important, starting from the question, and also I think, I don't know what you think about this, but I also I start from the end. I mean, I think it's better to tell the audience, this is what I found, and now I'm gonna explain you how I found it. I think that's better because, I mean, studies show that you have their attention for a very short period of time, and if you're gonna expand in half an hour, you can when you're talking, it feels like nothing, but when you're there, it's like that, like time stop. And and if you have the if you spend like 30 minutes explaining all of these graphics and stuff, because sometimes you need to explain them in the beginning, I mean, and in the end they will be very lost. They'll have no idea why are you showing these graphics, or things that you found. And because there's no point, there's no like there's nothing they're like expecting. So I think you have to start from the end and telling what you're finding, and then go from there and explain the things you find important. And one of the recommendations from my side is, sometimes we spend we when we start, we say, yeah, we try it, well, it was not good, or we're very sorry and stuff. Even if that's true, don't say that. That will bring your audience to the floor, and like, I'm not gonna even listen to this, because if this is nothing, and he's and you talk with no joy in your face, and you're not engaging with them, it's not interesting for someone to hear. So even if it's true that you created a piece of whatever, okay, so don't worry about that. Be confident. Start talking about what you did, and keep the eyes on the audience. Try to keep them engaged for what you're saying, and sometimes this is not easy because you can be scared of talking. And this is not, and it's not true that if you have scared, and if you're scared, that's it for you. You can learn this. You can practice and learn. And as Eric said in the last session, the first iterations of you doing something, it's not going to be a good thing. I mean, remember when you were starting walking, you were not good there. And it is the same thing here. If when you start doing presentations, they're going to be maybe bad. But if you do one and another one, and you practice, I think you'll get to the point where you'll be so confident of what you're saying that the scary part will go away.
Dale Carnegie has a lot of books on the how to like effectively present. I can't think of the name of it right now, but in terms of presenting, like watching yourself in a mirror is good. Videoing yourself and watching the playback is even better. You will notice some things. And typically, projecting your voice, being probably a lot louder than you think you need to be, moving around more than you think you need to move around to keep people interested, are things that we don't think about. But yeah, I'm pretty lively now in my presentations when I'm standing in front of people. And going back to what you said, Fabio, about the stating the summary up front, or like the high level findings up front, like absolutely, I state the question and why it's valuable. And then I like the very next slide is high-level summary. So basically everything you're going to see in this deck that's of importance, I've boiled down into 4 concise bullets. And then I'm going to go through my presentation, and then I'm going to have like in summary, and it's basically going to be the same thing again. That's going to like recap again the high level findings. And like sometimes that feels redundant, but that's sort of how you need to give information to people to make sure that they're with you. You know, sometimes redundancy keeps people with you.
Yeah, there's a saying, I forget exactly how it goes, but it's something like, tell me what you're going to tell me, then tell me, and then tell me what you told me. So it's like 3 things. And just one thing to add to that, Kristen, is filler words. I think videotaping yourself is better than a mirror because you'll get to hear the ums, the ahs, this. I think I tend to say so because I heard myself in the presentation I gave a few weeks ago. I didn't want to watch it, but I did. And apparently so was a common word for me. But now that I know that, I'll try to avoid it. And one tip for avoiding that is just pause and breathe. It might feel awkward for you, but I did have a lot of trainings at Deloitte. We really feel strongly about the executive presence and communication, and they do record you while you go up there and present to an audience. And I remember pausing because I remember that's something that they taught me, and I felt really awkward. But when I actually saw myself doing it, it was like half a second, but to me, it really felt like a whole minute. So it's always more awkward in your head than it is out loud.
No, and I think that's very important because sometimes when you're talking and you're nervous, because I mean, even though if you're very good at it, you're gonna be nervous. That's the feeling when you're talking to an audience, and even more if this thing you're presenting is from you, like your findings and stuff. I mean, and sometimes you can get out of your head. And I mean, I've been there, and I've been talking in an audience, and in some point I'm thinking, what the hell am I saying? It's like I have no idea of how I got here, or I have no clue what the point's gonna be when I'm saying these words right now. So, and this is something you have to learn too, to be focused on talking and what are you saying. And practicing is the best thing for that. It's the best thing for that because I mean, I think the part of you being there and talking out of nowhere may seem very interesting because, oh yeah, I'm very good at improvising and stuff. Maybe if that could be true, but if you don't have a storyline to follow, it will be very hard for you to make your point clear. So even though I mean, okay, if you have a lot of experience, maybe you're different here, but for most people, it's very important to practice. I mean, if you don't want to see you, don't tape yourself. I mean, that's a good that's something I do, and talk to the mirror. That's something good too. But if you don't want to do any of that, practice. I mean, in your bed, you have your presentation there, and speak very, very loud, just for you to hear it, and do it like 2 or 3 times, and you'll see when you actually do the presentation, it will be much better, and you'll be much more confident because you know what your point. And I think the next step for that is actually scripting your talks, and that's not where we are right now because you won't be doing that in a business session. That'll be very lame. But if for some reason you're expected to talk in a very big audience, I mean, if you see some TED talks, most of them are actually reading or they have a way of following what they're gonna say, and scripting your things, even though if you're not gonna read it in the actual presentation, could be good because you can go there and read what you wrote. And hey, I forgot to say this when I was presenting this right now, so I'm gonna do it again. So I'm sure I'm saying these things here. So think it. I mean, this is a lot of things to do, but the hardest part is the beginning. But because then it just goes very, very easy.
Yeah, Fabio, just one thing to add before we move on to the questions on scripting. So a few thoughts on that. I think it is a good idea to start with a script, especially if you're, beginner on the topic or the presenting itself. But I think it's smart to just move forward from that. And then let's say you have 10 paragraphs that you'd like to read, or, you wrote the script. I think the next step is remove some of that detail and kind of have like a skeleton outline of what you want to discuss. And then go through it again and just have the 10 topics, or, just have 10 slides with just those words on it. So it gives you kind of the cue of what you wanted to discuss, but it doesn't constrict you to the script, because I've seen failures where, you start reading and you skip a line, and then it looks a lot worse than if you were just to stand there for, even triple that amount of time to just gather your thoughts, because it's more genuine than somebody reading. I think it adds that human connection. But I do agree with the starting with a script, so you know what you want to say.
No,
I've seen a lot of people who...
Sorry, Kristen, just let me finish that. I think following a script when you're talking is way too hard, and you have to be an expert in doing that, and you have to be a very good person talking in front of an audience. I mean, don't go to the scripting part if you're a beginner. You're gonna fail. That's when you have a lot of experience and you have been taught. I mean, after the top 1,000, you can start doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, because I've seen a lot of people who try and script out what they're doing. And I think we all have this problem in the beginning when you're really junior. You may be in a meeting where you're supposed to present and the person before you goes over, and now you only have 5 minutes, and they look at you and they say, just give me the highlights, give me the top 3 things that you want to tell me about. And they're like, they just freeze, because they have, planned out what they're going to say word for word going through, and not really holistically thought about like, what are the big things here that I'm trying to get across. I've seen it a lot.
I've actually had that happen to me personal. I think it's my hugest failure of my career, but it was really early on in my career, probably about 10 years ago, where I had to give a training on something, and it was a group of us, like 8 people, and I knew my section. I memorized what I'm going to say. I didn't even have to read the script, because I knew word for word the slides I'm covering, and this is the training I'm doing. And the person that was supposed to speak before me, he dialed in and he's like, "Oh, my computer's not booting up. Hey, Kate, can you just take this few slides for me?" And I was like, I know what I need to say. I know nothing else at this point, and I literally choked. And I'm like I was in a room with people, and somebody just had to jump in. But yeah, totally there.
I have to agree with what you guys said, because the thing here is that people needs to have they need to understand the difference between memorizing stuff just to talk like a robot and actually knowing what you're gonna say. It's very different. It's very different. And the good thing is you need to be very aware of what you're saying and what you're going to say in every moment of a presentation. But if for some reason someone stops you, you need to answer their questions right away. And I think when I was in a conference, I think it was a physics conference, one of my teachers said to me, if someone asks you a question, answer right there. Don't say to him, "Hey, I'm just talking. Wait until the end." This is not. There's fights about this. If you have to wait to the end for questions, if it's better to have an open conversation with the audience. This is a topic of investigation right now. But I think for me, it has been very useful to answer questions right away when they present, because if someone important is hearing you talking about this, and they have a question, and they ask you that question, you don't answer and tell him, wait until the end. Maybe he was expecting for you to clarify something to understand the rest of it. And if you didn't do that, he will be lost from that point to the end. So maybe it's better to answer some questions there. And when you have time, maybe you ask questions in the final part.
That's a good segue to answering some questions.
Yeah, so we have questions that they're very weird questions because they're related to this space we're creating right now. And we have one question from Murtuza, and he said, as I am came for the first time, I have a few questions. How often do you guys have a talk here? That's a very good question for us because I mean normally, and I'm gonna start the answer here. Normally, this was a weekly event.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we go to a 2 week thing, like every 2 weeks. And now, because we have a lot of things to do and stuff, now we're trying to follow that 2 week like program, but sometimes we cannot do it on 1 week, and we move it to the next one. And you can expect something between 2 weeks and 3 weeks for each talk. For now, maybe that'll change in the future, but now that's the way we're doing it. The other question here, is there a specific topic every time, or is it random? So one of you want to answer his?
Yes, it's very strategically planned in advance based on conversations that we hear and kind of the trends that we see on LinkedIn and other social media, and see the hot topics. And also we do have discussions beforehand in terms of what we think will be relevant for the audience. But if you have suggestions, we'd love to hear them.
Yep, just type them into the chat.
Yeah, and I mean, in the beginning, this started to be, I mean, when we started this, it was very, very random. But after people started joining the group and this became a group, we decided it was better to have the thing that Kate just said, because it's better for you to have a structure of what we're talking about. And if, I mean, this is not a question here, but just to mention, if you're seeing this live, you can watch the episodes on the internet right now. They're all on YouTube. They're free. They're all there. You can see it again, share it with your friends. They're gonna be there forever until YouTube dies. So the next question is, who hosts this, and who are the guests, if any? So we are the hostess and the guests.
Yeah.
I mean, right now there are no guests. We're like a team here talking. Oh, Kate left. I think she
I have
was
to
a
choose
guest.
my computer charger.
Okay.
Yes.
She's not a guest anymore.
Okay. All right. So we're a group of people that with Kate, we have Sarah, we have Kristen, we have Eric, we have Bo, we have Andres, Tari, and I. And we're here because of, I don't even know how we got here in the first place, all of us. But we're here every time to talk about data science. So right now we have no guests. Maybe it could be interesting in the future if to have guest people talking about a subject here. So if for some reason you think someone will be a good fit to be a guest, like someone an expert in your company or whatever, and just please reach to us through LinkedIn, and we can discuss it further. Okay, so one question more. I'm gonna. What are the important points to cover in data storytelling? Okay.
Points to cover in data storytelling. So I'm going to take this question as what's important to cover as part of data storytelling. And I think we covered much of it already. But I think one thing we didn't touch much on is the context. So setting the context for the audience, I think, is really important. Because let's say you give them a data point, like, sales were $100,000 this year. Without context, they can't really do much with that. There's not much action that can be taken. But if you tell them that, your competitors had less or more sales in this season, or, last year, you had $1 million in sales, so that's clearly a red flag, and that context can help them make decisions. So I think that's one thing we didn't really touch on. What are your thoughts, Kristen?
Yep, that's a good one. And, I like to I think we already talked about how, coming up with the story is challenging, but it really, or, the challenges that we face, but it's really that taking a step back and like thinking about, because what's a story? A story has a beginning, a climax, an end, and then saying, okay, how can I bring this to life? And maybe that's spending a fair amount of time on Google looking for clip art that's going to enhance the presentation, and trying to keep that on brand colors, and all aesthetically pleasing, because I've seen some bad clip art put in presentations as well, but it's really that extra polishing, right? It's like that taking it up a level, really thinking about how you want to convey this, and, finding a logical order, and making sure that what you're presenting is interesting, because, we said in the last, when we were talking about communicating with stakeholders, that not everything you do as part of the analysis needs to be part of the presentation. And I think that that's something that a lot of people do when they're juniors. They say, well, I made this chart, so I'll put it in my presentation. Like, if it doesn't say anything, don't put it in the presentation. Like, if it doesn't have anything to say, then like you probably don't care, which means your audience is not going to care. So it's really thinking about what's required to get your message across, how to get your message across in a way that is, cohesive. Think about the order of your slides and the order in which you're presenting the information, and that makes sense. And finding, ways to do it so that it's not just a table of numbers, or it's not just a graph, putting, giving real thought to what the titles are of your slides. And is that like, giving the message away immediately? Someone reads the title, they understand what the slide is. The graph, they can figure out exactly the message you're trying to get across in like 2 seconds. I personally dislike when people put like 2 axes on a graph. Like, they'll have like the line above and the bars below. Like, too much trying to figure out what's going on. Like make it as simple as possible for people to understand what it is you're trying to get across to them, and know what it is that you're trying to get across to them.
Yeah.
And that's oh, sorry, Kate, you were talking about. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I think this is one of the most important things, is that you don't have to create the most complicated and fancy graph to explain something. You have to create a simple graph that can explain things better for you, and it's a visual aid for you. That's what the name is. I mean, it's helping you present stuff. And I think we see this a lot in science, but keep this in mind. When you see very complicated graphs on papers, sometimes that's because they're charging the author for each one of their graphics. Each plot, I mean, there are very important publications out there in science that they will charge you per plot, all right? So they spend a lot of time thinking how to present a lot of information in one simple plot. This is not your point here. No one is charging you for creating a second slide with the same thing, but in a different way. And if you think it's easier for people to understand different graphs that can explain something and then combine them than having them combined, and then you spend 2 minutes of your valuable time explaining what they mean, what does that graphic mean. So it's better to go simple, and to understand what that simple makes an easy communication process for you to explain what you're talking about.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys said. And the only thing I wanted to add is just being deliberate about every single thing you put on, let's call it a canvas, be it a presentation, a deck, whatever medium you're using. If you're adding a color legend or a shape legend or a border or an axis or a zero line, grid line, there's so many things you can get rid of and add. Make sure that it's every single thing on there serves a purpose. If you are using clip art, which I do use, because I think it helps just get people excited sometimes about the dashboard, or helps tell the story. Be deliberate about, you know, what visual you're using, and make sure it actually looks appealing, because I have seen some people just take a random, you know, the first Google image that comes up, and it might be blurry or have like watermarks on it. You know, just take the extra few seconds. It doesn't take much time to add that polish.
Right. So I think we can go to the other question. Is can we do ML/DL, that's machine learning and deep learning, without TensorFlow? I have a really bad computer, and I think this is not related, but okay, we can answer it. And I mean, there's a lot of libraries there. You don't need to use TensorFlow. If you are in the R world, and Caret is a very, or Caret, I think it's
Caret.
Yeah, there's a lot of libraries that are very easy to use, and depending on how much data you have, they'll run on your computer without any issue. And if you're in the Python world, you have scikit-learn, which is very friendly, very simple to use. It will run on your laptop, and actually, there's a lot of different things you can do with scikit-learn and other libraries like PyTorch and stuff. But I really recommend Spark. Even that for your computer, it's very easy to get. Like if you don't have that amount of data, like big data and stuff, you can work with Spark in your computer, and you can create very cool models and do machine learning and now deep learning too with Spark. And the good thing about this is, if for some reason you're experimenting on some data in your computer with Spark, when you finish with the experiment, you can put the same code without any changes, just changing the data into a cluster, and it will run. So I think that's one of the things I can say to you, that you don't need TensorFlow for everything. Okay, so I think we have a last question here. Is you guys talk about BLUF, bottom line front up, not bottom line up front. What if the audience is senior C executives or clients, and they only care about the bottom line or summary, and not so much about the underlying details?
So I think starting with the bottom line up front doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do a deep dive into your tools, technologies, data, and details. I think it gives them a sense of the journey that you're going to take them on, and then the next step could be, you know, diving into how that bottom line impacts their business, or, you know, making it relevant for the audience. So it doesn't really have to be a, you know, deep dive on data.
And I've done analyses before too. If I did a huge cluster analysis segmentation of the base, I've had multiple decks for that one analysis, and they were for different audiences. And the audience that was super high up, it was 3 slides. And we spent, you know, a fair amount of time talking about each of those slides, but it was only 3 slides because that's what was, you know, going to work for that audience. And I knew that he wasn't going to want to see, you know, 20 different graphs or whatever. It was just, you know, here's the problem we were trying to solve. Here are the segments, and I can point to each one and tell you sort of who they are, how we might motivate them. And like, that was it. That was the deck. It was 3 slides, you know? And so it is that, you know, being able to context switch and understanding who you're talking to, and giving them, you know, how they're best going to digest it, and how you're going to end up looking as though you can take feedback and plan appropriately.
And I think that there's a way of creating just one slide deck that have a lot of high level information in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And if you know the audience is not that into the technical part, you can go further. That's it. You finish there. Thank you very much. And you can spend your time as whatever. I mean, if you have 40 slides, you can spend 60 minutes in one slide. You don't need to go through all of them. And this is this is very important. Sometimes I create slides with information, and I have slides prepared for the questions that they're going to ask me. I mean, sometimes you know what the audience is going to ask if you have experience here, and you don't want to go into the details because you don't have time, or you think they will you'll lose them if you go to the details. But it's okay. Don't do that. Don't present it, but have those slides prepared for the very end of the presentation. And if someone for some reason asks about that, hey, don't worry, I have a slide for that. And you go there and you explain specifically to him what he asked. So I think that's the easiest way of going to a presentation, to be prepared for the things that that can come up from that presentation.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Fabio. And you said, go in there with one slide. You can go in there with no slides. I mean, you can have them in your back pocket. There's no rule that says you must have like a PowerPoint or something to bring into a meeting. You did the analysis, the facts, the findings. Sometimes those C-suites just want to have a conversation. And, we've had several clients that you come in there with a deck and they're like, okay, just go. Like, we don't want to sit and read. We came here to talk to you. You're the expert. Just tell me what the problem is. I don't have to look down while you tell me. So it's still okay to have it with you and be prepared. But again, going back to the know your audience and, know what they like and what they're used to.
Cool. So I think we're finished. We have one last question that is interesting for the next things is, could you please let us know in advance what the next topic will be? This will give a chance to do our homework or on that topic and ask you questions. So we actually did this, I think, a week ago, or maybe a little more. We shared the content for this presentation on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram. So if you want to know which topic we're going to cover in the next session, please follow us in the YouTube and on LinkedIn and whatever platform we are, because we're going to share that with you. We're going to share in advance. I think 1 week in advance, we're going to share with you what would be the topics so you can have your questions prepared. All right. So, okay, this is a question for the end. Kindly schedule next live session for how to process LiDAR and cloud data using computer vision. Okay. We'll try to do that. I mean, I cannot tell you where we're gonna do it, but we're gonna try to do that.
We'll put it on our list.
We're gonna put it on our list. Yeah. So thank you a lot, and I hope seeing you next week or next 2 weeks.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.